Let's make this adorable Christmas wreath. So the first thing we need to do is to peel our sticker from our backing paper and make sure it's nice and central. Give it a good stick to the garment, make sure there's no lifting or any areas that could peel back. We're going to use the sharp needle for this project, and we're going to put a good arm pull on of the green yarn, or whichever colour you want to use for your leaves. This is approximately 1 metre or 2 metres in length. Now we're going to start with the leaves in all of these little areas except the hollies. I want to do that in a different colour green, so we're just going to do the leaves for now. So find a leaf that you'd like to start from. We're just going to start from the tip of the first one, pull your yarn all the way through and making sure to leave a tail underneath to tie off to. We're going to take our needle and drop it down just before the end and pull that yarn all the way through the centre. We're then going to bring our needle back up under the jumper, and we're going to come down around about 1 or 2 millimeters. You'll see me just point it out here. And we're going to bring our needle up from that section and drop it back down into the same center part that we just dropped the first stitch into. And by bringing it down 1 or 2 millimeters, you're going to get that nice leafy shape. So we're just going to repeat that again on the opposite side. And then we're going to go ahead and do this again, coming down again 1 or 2 millimeters, so slightly lower, and dropping it into the same area. We can repeat this also on the opposite side, and that's now our leaf nice and full. We're going to grab our needle and just bring it to the bottom section. So this is just the end of the stem, and just tuck that into the bottom of the leaf. And this is simply how we're going to do all of our leaf stitching. Now we've got plenty of yarn still on our needle, so we're just going to continue to the one next to it. If we can just try and use up all of our yarn, then we're going to have less little knots underneath. So I'm just going to repeat that process now and just continue until we finish this whole section. I should have enough yarn on my needle to be able to do this and get this whole area filled out nicely. I'm just going to put that last little stem in there to finish off this area, and once we have done with this, we're just going to flip our garment over, and you'll see now we've got our threaded needle and also our starting tail. So we're just going to take our threaded needle and thread it through our work so that these two tails are now together. And now that they're together, we can tie them in a triple knot and snip away any excess ends, and that is how we tie off. So once we've finished and we have done all of the leafy greens, we can then move on to our little mini mushrooms. So I'm going to do my mushrooms pink because I want to keep this whole wreath a sort of a girly pinky colour. I've put onto my needle about 1 metre of the oatmeal yarn, and for this we're going to go in and do a satin stitch. So we're just going to start at the base here of our little stalk, pull our yarn through, and we're just going to leave a little tail at the end to tie off to. And we're just going to go over and do a satin stitch so you can keep your needle inside the markings so long as you stay this way all the way to the top. And this is going to keep you nicely uniformed and give you some really neat stitching. So I'm just going to bring my needle up again, take it over and bring it down, and we're just going to fill in this area with a nice even satin stitch. And once that last stitch is now locked in place, we're just going to flip our garment over, and you'll see we've got our starting tail and our threaded needle. We're just going to take our threaded needle all the way through our work, and now we can tie those two ends together in a triple knot and snip away any excess. Next, we're going to thread onto our needle about 1 metre of the whichever colour yarn you're going to do your mushrooms for, and we're going to do the exact same stitch. Now, I always like to do my satin stitches in 2 halves, so I always start through the middle as my first stitch, and then I move across to the right, and then I go back across to the left. I don't really know why I do this. I think it's more just it keeps me keeping my satin stitch quite neat, because it is very easy to do this stitch and it not look really neat. So I find this method helps keep it really tidy. So we're just going to fill in this space, and then once we've filled in this space, we can then take our needle across to the left hand side. And once we put that last little stitch in place, we are then going to take our needle across and bring those two tails together, which we can then tie off again in a triple knot. This is exactly the same way that we're going to be doing this each time for each little area. So you'll see here that I'm just going to weave my needle through my work, and we can tie those two together. Next, we're going to put on about 1/2 metre of white yarn, and this is going to be for the little mushroom dots. So we're just going to bring our needle up, and these are very sporadic as to where you want to place them. Make sure that you leave a little tail underneath to tie off to. I would suggest probably 3 or 4 would be enough for this design, and you can put them pretty much wherever you like. It's just a simple up and over stitch, but you just have to make sure that there's some yarn or some fabric underneath to hold on to, so you're not pulling it through the seam hole. And now that our little mushroom dots are there, you just flip your garment over and we just bring those two tails together and tie them together in a triple knot. And that's our beautiful mushrooms. We're just going to fill in these two. Now with this one, you'll see there's a little underside to the mushroom. Now for this, I'm just going to pop a couple of back stitches in to do the outline. And then once I've done that outline on both sides, I'm just going to go in with a little satin stitch to fill in this area, but I'm going to do it horizontally just to give it a little bit more dimension. And that is our gorgeous little mushrooms all complete. Next, we've threaded on some thinner yarn this time. We've gone with the lighter yarn for the little acorns, and I've gone with the oatmeal colour, and we're just going to do again a satin stitch. So we're just going to bring our yarn up and leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. Starting in the middle, we're going to move across to the right with our satin stitch, and then we will move across to the left, and we can repeat the same process for the top part of the acorn as well. When we're finished, we're just going to weave those two ends so that they meet, and then we can tie them together in a triple knot. And that's our adorable little acorn finished. Next, we're going to have a look at the holly. Now, for this one, I'm going to be using the thinner green, and I'm just going to bring my needle up from the top, the tip part of the holly, and pulling it through, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. I'm then just going to bring my needle, just like we do with our leaves, just before the end into the center part. Now we're going to work from right to left here, and we're just going to fill in the space. Another way that you can actually do the holly is by doing a back stitch outline, and then you could fill it in with a satin stitch. I find this way is a little bit quicker, and it does give the same effect. So if you are wanting something a little bit more simpler, I would suggest this method. If you want something that's a little bit more detailed and looks more holly shaped, you could do a back stitch around the outline and then fill in with a satin stitch. But this way actually works really, really well. And once our hollies are all complete, we're just going to tie them off with a triple knot underneath. So once we finish with those, we're going to move on to our candy canes. Now for this one, I'm going to be using the raspberry thin yarn. And I've put on about a 1/2 meter of yarn for this section, and we're going to do a chain stitch here. So we're going to bring our needle up from the bottom section of the candy cane, making sure to leave a tail underneath to tie off to. We're just going to move the yarn off to the left, and you can use your thumb to hold this in place. We're going to take our needle back down the hole that we just came up from and bring it up about 1/2 centimeter. Once we're here, we can then pull the needle through, and you'll see that we create this lovely little chain. And once we've done that chain and it's all in place, we're just going to again take our yarn off to the left, put our needle back down through the chain we just created, bring it up again about 1/2 centimeter and pull that through to create the second chain. And we're just going to continue like this all the way until we get to the end of the candy cane. And once we're at the end, we're just going to take our needle and we're just going to take it over the last chain and anchor it down. Now we don't need to do any knots here. We're just going to take our needle off our thread and just trim those ends, but we're going to leave those two little tails just hanging for the moment. Next, we're going to thread on about 1/2 meter of the white yarn, and we're going to start again at the bottom. So we're going to pull our needle through, leaving another tail to tie off, and we're going to use the opposite end of the needle, so the blunt end of the needle, and we're just going to thread underneath each chain. So we're just going to pull that through. We're going to take our yarn over, and then we're going to again pull through the next chain, take the yarn over, pull through the next chain, and we're just going to continue like this all the way until we get to the top. And this is how we create that gorgeous little spiral candy cane effect. Once we get to the very top, we're just going to anchor that down with a stitch, and we can then tie those two ends together. So when you flip your garment over, you'll see that you've got a pink tail and you've also now got a white tail. You can tie those two together into a triple knot nicely at the top and at the bottom. The next section we're going to be looking at is the bow. Now I've put a good armful of the pink yarn, the thin pink yarn for this section. I'm going to start with the middle. Now we're going to bring our needle up, leaving a tail again underneath, and we're just going to satin stitch inside the middle of the center of the bow. So we're just going to again start in the middle, move to the right, and then move to the left. Now we've got plenty of yarn on our needle, so we're going to continue with the outline here, and we're going to do a back stitch for this. So this is just using 1/2 centimeter spacing, or you can use longer or shorter if you like. I would suggest no longer than 1 centimeter. So this is how we do our back stitch. We just go up in 1/2 centimeter spacing, and we just go back on ourselves. And we're going to do this for the whole outline of the whole bow. So once that's all outlined, we've got enough yarn on our needle to fill in this section here. And we're just going to pop a couple of little straight stitches in there to fill in this space. So I've popped another good meter of yarn back onto my needle, and I'm just going to go in and fill in the bow with a satin stitch. Once the inside's complete, we can then look at the little bottom section of the ribbon, and again it's just going to be using the satin stitch to fill in this space as well. For our berries, we're going to go in with a French knot. Now, a lot of people love or hate this stitch. I personally love it. It does take a little bit of practice. So for this, we're just going to bring our needle up from the bottom part of that circle. We're going to pull that through, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. You only need a small amount of thread for this because we're going to do one at a time. So we're going to put our yarn into a C shape, and then we're going to take our needle to the top of that C, and we're going to wrap it around 3 times. We're then going to take that yarn into the right hand and go underneath your sweater. We're going to take our needle into a new part of the circle, give that bottom yarn a tug, and as you keep that tension, you're going to push your needle through. Now, this does take a little bit of practice, so don't feel disheartened if you don't get it first time. And with a little bit of practice, you'll soon be able to fill your beautiful wreath with gorgeous little berries. And once that's through, again, we just tie each one off with a triple knot. When you feel more confident, you can keep the thread going and do multiple French knots at once. But for now, I wouldn't stress too much about that, and I would practice just one at a time. Now let's have a look at the center of our wreath. Now for this, I'm going to be using a chain stitch. So starting with the bottom of the E, we're going to use our chain stitch method again, which is moving our yarn off to the left with our thumb, and we're just going to go back down through the hole that we just came up from, coming up about 1/2 centimeter, and pull that through. And we're going to continue just like with the candy canes, the chain stitch for the whole outline of this letter. So once we finish that line, our needle is just a little bit too far away from where we want it to be. So to fix this, we're just going to turn our garment over, and we're just going to do what's called a whipped back stitch, and we're just going to thread through our work and bring our needle to the next part where we want it for our next section of stitching. So you're just going to weave through your work, and it should only take about 3 or 4 times, and then your needle will be in position for your next section. And from here, we're just going to bring our needle through that chain, and we're just going to continue with our chain stitch. And once you've finished that, we're just going to tie off again with a triple knot, and just like that, your gorgeous wreath is complete. So let's now remove our stabilizer and get it ready for drying. We're just going to take our garment and run it under some lukewarm water. It does take a little bit of time before the stabilizer starts to dissolve. You may also need to use your hand and just give it a little bit of a gentle rub to get it to remove. I also personally like the little shower setting on my tap. If you have this, it's definitely good to use. It does take a little bit of time to remove all the stabilizer, and do spend a bit of time to try and remove all the tiny little pieces, as when it dries, if you haven't removed it, it will be a little bit tough. Once you're finished, you just flat lay to dry and you are good to enjoy your beautiful creation. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, guys. Happy stitching, and also Merry Christmas.